Creating reusable elements is key for any web design project in Figma. It leads to consistent designs and organized files. We already have our colors and text styles available for us to reuse throughout this project, so let's tackle the next piece of the puzzle, components. If you're new to Figma or similar design tools, here's how components work. Essentially, you create an element once, and that becomes the main component. Then you can use instances of that main component several times across your design file. And if you ever want to go back and make a change, when you make that change on the main component level, those changes trickle down and affect all of the instances. You can create different variants of each component and even animate between states. But before we get too in the weeds, let's create our first component, which is going to be a button. So I'm just going to come up here where we have our icons that we will also be making into components. And I'm going to create a frame. So I'm just pressing F as a shortcut on my keyboard. And we won't worry about the size at the moment. We'll hit T on the keyboard and just write the word button. And we want to make sure that this is in one of our text styles. So let's do the body text style. And we want to make sure that this is in one of our colors. And we also want to make sure that the frame is in one of our colors. All right, looking good. So for this main button component, what I want to do is on the frame level, turn on auto layout. And so what that does is no matter how much we type, the frame is going to respond. So let's just set this exactly how we want it. On the right and left, let's have 18 pixels. And on the top and bottom, 15 looks pretty good. And then I'm going to come up here to the corner radius and we're going to just drag it all the way out because we want a pill-shaped button. Okay, let's make sure that auto layout is working correctly. Yeah, that's looking really good. Okay, now as I'm looking at this might be a good opportunity to introduce a new text style. So what I'm going to do is select on this text, come up and hit the break link or detach style. And I think instead of 16, I want this to be 14, but a little bit bolder. So let's do semi-bold for this. Okay, and then I'm going to go up and add this as a style. So we'll call this button text. Now we've added this to our local text styles and we can use it anytime we create a new button, which probably won't be very often. Okay, so we have this, but it's not a component yet. So how do we make something into a component? There's lots of ways to do this in Figma. You can come up here to this icon. This is the component icon and you can just click that. There's also a shortcut, so if we clicked on this frame, we could do Option Command K, and that would also make it into a component. So once we do that, I'm just going to rename this component button. And here we have this component. So I'll show you exactly how this works. I'm going to hit copy, paste to create a new instance of this component. So this is the instance, this is the main component. You'll always know the difference because the main component is going to have this filled diamond both on the canvas and on the layers panel over here. You can see this is the instance and this is the main component. So what if I made a change to this on the instance level? So let's say I actually want this text to be burnt orange. So you can see it's only changing on this instance level, which is what makes components really flexible. So that is an option. But what if I want to make a change that applies to all of the instances? So what I'm going to do is make that change on the main component level. So let's select the frame. Maybe we want to reverse this. Maybe we want a dark background and white text. So I'm just going to switch the background color to our off black and change the text color to our off white. And as you can see, that has made the change happen on this instance level. And it doesn't matter how many instances of this component we have in our file or where they're located on what page, any instance of that component is going to reflect those changes made on the main component level. Okay, so let's get rid of this instance for now and focus on creating a couple more variants of this component. So I'm just going to click on this here, go over to properties, hit hit the plus button and create a new variant. So what that's going to do is give us this bounding box where all of the main components are going to live. So let's just add a variant by clicking this button right here. Okay, so now we need to get organized a little bit. So we have on the component level, we have this, it's called button. But what are the variants called? So this one, we need to name the property. So we'll just name it type, and we'll call this filled. Now let's create one that is more of a ghost button. So it'll have an outline, but it won't be filled. So we'll call that ghost. And then let's also make one that has the off-white background. So we'll call this white. And now all these components look the same, but let's make those changes so that we have some different variants here. So on this one that we called ghost, I'm going to get rid of the fill and add a stroke. And we'll make sure that that stroke is this off black color. And I think it needs to be a little thicker, maybe 2. That should be good. And then we need to make the button text black so that you can actually see it. So there's our ghost button. Now let's do this one. And we kind of already had this, so let's take this back to what we had. The off-white background with the off-black text. Okay, so now we have this whole kind of set of components here, all under the same category of button. So now let's do this again. Let's drag out an instance of our component, and to drag a copy, you're just going to option drag. And so this is an instance like we had before, but now I'll show you how you can switch back and forth really easily between these different variants. So let's go over here. We're on filled right now, but you could turn this into a ghost, or you could turn this into the white version. So that is super handy, and there's lots more you can do with components that we will be getting into in future lessons. But for now, this is super handy. So now we're just going to do the same exact thing with our icons, because the reason that we want to make icons components as well is because it's going to be so much easier for us to switch in and out in our design file where we want what icons. If we ever want to use an element more than once throughout a file, it's best to make it into a component, because like I said, you only have to make the changes once on the main component and they trickle down and apply to all instances. So it really is the best way to use Figma, is by really diving into components whenever possible. Okay, so how do we go about making these into components? Well, we don't want to just make each of these a component because they're slightly different sizes. We have these two different size sets, but even between these two, this is 16 by 16, this is 17 by 12. We want to, when we're creating a component set, we want them to all be inside frames that are the same size. And this way you can sort of switch between them on your canvas whenever we're actually working on our designs. And you'll see what I mean later if that's not super clear. But basically what I want to do first is create a frame that can house each of these comfortably. So for this smaller set, let's use 24 by 24. So I'm just hitting F for frame, and I am just going to create a frame that is 24 by 24 pixels. And I'm just going to throw this icon inside there. And I'm just going to make sure it's centered. We want to make sure that we're using the correct colors here. So you can see these are what have a fill. This stroke. Okay, perfect. And there's actually a shortcut for doing what I just did. I wanted to show you, what I was doing, but if you click on this frame and then go over to selection colors and then change it, it will change everything on that frame that was that one color you chose and switch it to another color. So that's just a shortcut that will make your life easier when you're starting to sort of use your brand colors and apply different styles. Okay, so we have this frame. We're going to call this icon. And we don't really even need a background for this, so we'll just turn that off. Then we're going to do the same thing, that little trick, Option Command K to make it a component. Create a property, variant, add a variant, and then we're just going to go in and delete what's currently in here, which will take a double click. You can't just click on it like this because that's going to move this entire component. You have to double click in to this group and we're going to delete it, grab this new icon and cut or Control X or Command X, and then get inside of this frame here, this variant 2, and paste it inside, center it, and grab the correct color. So when I hover over it, you can see it's inside there, inside that component. Okay, looking good. Now I'm just going to do that a bunch more times until we have all of our icons here in this smaller set as variants of this one icon component. Okay, now that I've got all these icons, what we can do is name these appropriately. So again, instead of property 1, we're going to call this type, and we'll just go through and name all of these. So this is cart, this is credit card, this is calendar, we have star, shield, globe, ribbon, and arrow. Okay, and we might need arrow left and arrow right actually, so let's just make sure we have both of those. So arrow right and arrow left. Okay. And some people might separate these out, into a different sort of component and have like icon imagery, icon arrows. You can really get super organized and granular with how you do this, but for the sake of this project, this is completely fine. Okay, so now since these icons won't fit inside a 24 by 24, they're sort of their own category. So I want to make them something different. Instead of calling them icons, let's just call these furniture. And so we know that these are like the categories of furniture on the product index page. Again, you can really do this however it makes sense to you and your team, but this is just how it makes sense to me for this project. So we're going to go through the same process. I'm going to choose sort of a square size that's going to work for all of these. And then we're going to house them inside there. So for this, I think I'm going to do 36 by 36. So I'm going to do F. Then I'm going to create a frame that is 36 by 36. We'll drag in our first icon, make it centered. We will turn off the background, make it the correct color. And I want to show you another way to create a component set if you've already got frames that contain your imagery or your iconography. So what you're going to do is you can name these separately. So let's name this dresser. Copy and paste. This is before we're creating the component. We can do it this way. Rug. Chair. Sofa. Table. And we'll call this outdoor. Okay, So now we have all of these, and we can go up to this component icon, and now we have some options. We can create a component, like a single component out of all these frames, which is not what we want to do. We can create multiple different components so that they would each be, completely different, or we could create a component set, which is what we've done with those other icons. So let's do that, component set, and then we can name it furniture. And then what's going to happen is it has created this property already for us. So we can just name it type. And now we already have the type named what I named those frames: dresser, rug, chair, sofa, table, and outdoor. So just two ways to do the same thing depending on kind of where you are in your process. Okay, so now that we have these, let's apply them to our homepage. So what's cool is now that we've created these components, we can just leave these off to the side. We don't really even need to keep coming up here, because if you go into the layers panel and switch to assets, now we can see all of our local components. So you can see them bigger like this, or you could see them as a list view. So then from over here, we can just drag this in, and we can, of course, change from there what variant we're using. So for the filters, I guess, the categories that aren't selected, let's use this ghost button. So maybe this is called bedroom. Maybe we have one for outdoor. Maybe we have one for living room. Okay, so I'm just going to separate those out 16 pixels. I think that will be good. And then this, let's have one that is selected. So we'll make that all products is selected, and we'll make that one filled so that it's clear that it is selected. Okay, pretty good. Now these look a little bit wonky, so I'm just going to select all of them and come up here to this align, and we can just align them vertically. Okay, so they also look a little bit too far apart. So let's do 12 pixels between them, and then just line it up with the end of our products. Okay, that is looking good. And we're gonna come back and use some rulers and guides and grids and columns on this page when we're really defining it in a couple lessons. But for now, we just wanna get all the pieces on the page. At least that's how I prefer to work. Okay, one more button we might wanna add to this page is in this About Fernie section. So maybe we want to have like a contact button here. So again, I'm just going to drag out one of these buttons. Let's make this white, and we'll do contact us. Okay, pretty cool. All right, we're off to a really good start with our components. This way of working might not feel intuitive yet, but I promise if you stick with it, it's going to be worth it. It really helps you stay organized. And as we'll see at the end of this course, it also makes life so much easier for those who are collaborating with you, whether that be other designers, folks who are checking your work like project managers or design managers, or developers who are using these assets to actually build out the site. And of course, if you're working with clients, if you ever need to hand this off to them or come back to this project in a year or two, staying organized is definitely going to be your best bet. And this will become second nature to you because we have a lot more components to create together for the Fernie site. Next, let's tackle the header navigation and the footer.